Let us begin our meditation. First of all, we pay our attention to our breath. When we pay attention to our breath, shortly we realize the breath is either long or short. Let us assume our breath is long. You have to experience it yourself, experiment yourself to see whether your breath is long or not. If it is long inhaling, become aware of long inhaling as long inhaling, long exhaling as long exhaling. When you do this, you notice the breath, the body, and the mind slowly begin to calm down. Then you notice the breath shorter than before. Notice short inhaling as short inhaling, short exhaling as short exhaling. And then you can notice the beginning, middle, and end of inhaling, and the beginning, middle, and end of exhaling. And then you notice the beginning, middle, and end and a little pause before you begin exhaling. When you exhale, you can notice the beginning, middle, and end of exhaling and a pause. And then you will know the entire breath body, entire things that happen to the breath. You don't try to verbalize, conceptualize, or manipulate the breath. And this is not also the breath exercise, breathing exercise. And then your mind, body, feeling all become relaxed, calmer than before. Experiencing this calm, relaxed, peaceful state of breath, feeling, the mind, breathe in and breathe out. When all these are calm, relaxed, and peaceful, no greed can arise in the mind at that moment. Greed excites the mind, agitates the mind, and we cannot gain concentration. When everything is calm, relaxed, and peaceful, therefore, greed doesn't arise. And then the mind, the body, breath becomes even more calm, more relaxed, and more peaceful. That time, no resentment can stay in the mind. This really happens. When there is no greed, no resentment, the mind, breath, everything is calm, relaxed, and peaceful. At that time, perhaps you might feel even sleepy and drowsy. We have to overcome sleepiness and drowsiness, even though it is very pleasing and welcoming and sweet. We have to overcome the sleepiness and drowsiness. In order to overcome sleepiness and drowsiness, visualize very bright light. We all know when there is light, you cannot sleep. When you sleep, you have to turn off all the lights make the room pitch dark. Then you can sleep well. Now here in meditation we are not going to sleep. We want to remain awake. And therefore when you feel sleepy, visualize a bright light like sunlight. Or you may take a deep breath and hold it as long as you can and slowly breathe out. Again take a deep breath and hold it and as long as you can and slowly breathe out. When you do this several times, your sleepiness disappears, the body warms up, you have a lot of energy. When you have energy, the mind can sometimes become restless and full of worry. Therefore, we have to overcome restlessness and worry by focusing mind on the breath. In order to do that, we must try to forget the past and forget the future. When the mind is restless, you may remember certain traumatic experience, the things you have done incorrectly, and left something incomplete, or you may plan the future. All this can happen when the mind is restless. Therefore, we have to deliberately anchor the mind on the present moment. Present moment is full of breathing. We breathe and breathe and breathe all the time in the present moment. Every breath disappears, new breath appears, that disappears, another breath appears, that disappears. This goes on and on and on. So this is a very good impartial object to focus the mind on. When you do that, you may still have some doubt about your own success. You have to overcome doubt by thinking of the truth, thinking of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, morality, your own success. The Buddha is the most successful one in spiritual field, attained full enlightenment without any defilement in his mind. And he followed this Dhamma for him to attain that state. And Dhamma is older than the Buddha. He followed it, it is there. And then he attained full enlightenment and made the Dhamma his own teacher. Then he taught us, his disciples, to follow the Buddha's footsteps and the Dhamma. By following his instructions, many millions of people have attained liberation from samsaric suffering. We too can do that. We have already overcome our greed, resentment, sleepiness and drowsiness, restlessness and worry, and knowing our own little success, we can build up our confidence. Doubt will disappear. When all this disappears, we feel we are free from indebtedness, free from sickness, free from being in a cage or in a maximum security prison, free from slavery, free from a confused state in a desert, lost in a desert. We are free. When we feel that we are free, joy arises. Joy increases by degrees, and then gain happiness, which is the calming, soothing mental state, not excitement. When happiness arises, we gain concentration. When we gain concentration, we are not like a vegetable. The mind is working in its own sphere, and with sharp, clean, one-pointed state to realize impermanence of every tiny, minute thing. Everything, without any exception, is in a state of flux, changing, appearing, disappearing, expanding, contracting, all the time, everything. That way we can overcome our clinging, our hatred and delusion. That is our goal, and we try to achieve that goal even very tiny little. If we keep practicing all the time, one day we would be able to reach the goal and overcome all our greed, hatred and delusion and make a perfect mental health. Keeping this goal, lofty goal in mind, let us practice. Today is the continuation of our 37 factors of enlightenment. Today is mindfulness of Dhamma, mindfulness of the senses, sense bases, and internal sense bases, external sense bases, and the fetters that arise depending on these two. Now, there are several segments we have to understand. One, senses. We have 6 senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and mind. The second is sensory objects: form, sound, smell, taste, touch and thoughts, or mind objects. The third is the fetters. We have to understand these 3 segments very clearly, separately. Fetters are 10. These 10, let me list the 10 very quickly. Belief in the existence of permanent self is a fetter. Belief and doubt is a fetter, especially skeptical doubt. And third is believing in attaining liberation by following rules and rituals, rites and rituals. Fourth is greed. Fifth is hatred. Sixth is desire for fine material existence. Seventh is desire for non-material existence. 8 is conceit. 9th is again restlessness. 10th is ignorance. These are the 10 fetters. We must keep these 3 segments separately. Senses, sensory objects, and fetters. Now fetters are 10. First 5 fetters are earth-bound fetters, down to earth fetters, heavy fetters. Other 5 is light fetters, and heavy fetters are like water, moisture. It comes down to the earth, heavy. Light fetters like heat. As you know, heat rises up, moisture comes down. That's a very standard physical law. Now, similarly, in spiritual matters, there are certain, these 10 fetters, for instance, first 5 are heavy, and they are bound, they are earth-bound, coming down, weighing us down, and keep them pressed down to the earth. And the other fetters are fine, very refined types of fetters, and still they are fetters. They goes upward. Upward is normally when we talk about downward and upward in the spiritual practice in the Buddha's teaching, we don't see all the wholesome things are up in the air, above clouds. All the bad things are on the ground or under the ground. We don't. These are just metaphorical, figurative, for people to understand the difference between these two. Therefore, we don't believe that Nibbana is up in the air, hanging from clouds, or somewhere hanging somewhere. And Samsara is down on the ground and so forth. We don't believe in that. But we use these terms to make our communication easy as figurative expressions to relate to people as to what the spiritual matters are. So, now having this little explanation of these 3 segments, let me begin the rest of the talk. I have given a couple of talks on this before, but today I thought of defining, classifying, and giving little more details on these fetters. Fetters are binding factors. Binding factors. Now, we discussed the eyes and visual objects, ears and sound. If they were not clear to you, when I explained the nose and smell today, perhaps what you did not understand or you were not very clear about other two also will be clear to you. Now nose. So we must understand the nose. What is nose? Biologists explain what the nose is. and they have very clear, detailed explanation. But in the Buddha also used them not in the biological sense. It also doesn't mean that Buddha dismissed biological explanation, but he focuses only on the spiritual path, spiritual way. The nose is made up of 4 elements. In physics, there are 6 elements. It doesn't matter, even they come out of these 4 elements: earth, water, air, fire. And the earth elements we cannot see. We can feel the hardness of earth element. Hardness. Hardness is the characteristic of earth element. It occupies space. Its behavior can be observed. But earth element, outside earth element, is not something permanent. It is impermanent. Similarly, nose is made up of those impermanent elements. Therefore, nose also is impermanent. Now, we understand the nose first. That is one of the 6 senses, is impermanent. And the nose, the what you call sensing, smelling area becomes weak. As we first it is very tender, then it becomes strong, and then afterward it becomes weak. For instance, old people do not smell the same thing in the same way as young people. Old people's smell is very blunt, not very sharp, not very clear. That is very true. I know that for sure, because I am old. You will see this clearly when you grow old. This shows the area in our nose becomes the smelling area. Those nerves, very tiny little senses or nerves, sensory nerves in our nose, when they become weak, we cannot smell well. Okay. So nose is impermanent. When we say nose impermanent, not only outside appearance, but inside, its function, its ability to smell becomes weak. Now with this, the smell may be the same. That you smell, young people smell and old people smell, the smell remains relatively the same, but the way we experience the smell would be different from young nose to old nose. Anyway, when this is the understanding of nose. That is why the meditator knows the nose. It sounds like playing on word. Knows the nose. And knows the smell. These two. And the fetter that arises depending on these two. Now, these 3 stages. First stage is knowing the nose. Second stage is knowing the smell, the odor. Third stage is having the fetter arising depending on these two. Now, this fetter is not there always. This fetter is not always. So he knows the nose, he knows the smell, and since then when fetter arises, he knows the fetter is arisen. Unarisen fetter arises, is arisen. What is this fetter? It can be one of those 5 down to earth heavy fetters. Down to earth fetters. What are the down to earth or heavy fetters? That can be the belief in the permanent self. So the person thinks, I smell. So the notion of I appears in the mind. I. That is one of the fetters. I is a fetter. Before we smell it, we don't think I smell. Only when it arises, we know I smell. At that moment, the notion of permanent self also arises along with this thought, I. Normally we don't see the phenomenon arising dependent on factors. It is dependently arisen mental state. But we don't see dependently arisen mental state. We think, I smell. This is a very subtle and very profound, meaningful explanation of the Buddha. And then this is how this fetter arises, I. Sakkaya Ditthi. Then the smell, another fetter can arise, like the desire. Desire is a fetter. Greed. If the smell happens to be pleasant or pleasing to the nose, desire arises. That's a fetter. If the odor happens to be unpleasant, resentment can arise. So both are fetters. One fetter is grasping, other fetter is rejecting. Desire and hatred or dislike arise. Then we immediately become aware, oh, this fetter was not in us, now it is arisen. Now this is, we must remember what we are doing is training our mind to be mindful. Training our mind to be mindful through the nose. That is why we have to, Buddha said, even this morning we recited in meditation hall, whatever state, mental state arises, we must become aware of that state. So that becoming aware of that particular state is the mindfulness practice. Mindfulness practice. Then, remember we are talking about 4 foundations of mindfulness. This is mindfulness of the Dhamma, the phenomenon. And this phenomenon happens like this. And then unarisen fetter is arisen. We become aware of that. And then this fetter we see, in order to get rid of this fetter, using our mindfulness, using our concentration, we become aware of the impermanent nature of this fetter. What is the fetter arisen? In this case maybe greed or hatred or notion of permanent self and so forth is arisen. As we pay attention to this fetter, it slowly dwindles down, slowly fades away and completely disappears. So first we know the unarisen fetter is arisen, and then we pay attention to that fetter, and then we pay attention to that fetter, then that fetter slowly fades away because it is impermanent. No smell can stay in our nose forever. No odor can, whether it is pleasant, unpleasant, we like or dislike, it stays in our nose all the time, or in our brain, or in the area in our brain that recognize the smell, doesn't stay there all the time. Only when these factors come together, that particular phenomenon called smell or odor arises. And after a while it slowly fades away. Then the meditator knows, such and such a fetter was not there before, it is arisen, now it is gone, and then during that particular period of meditation, that fetter may not arise again. Perhaps a very strong wind took that fetter, this smell away, this odor away. This is those molecules doesn't stay there all the time. When wind blows, all the odor giving molecules will disappear, and it may not come back again. So the meditator becomes aware of the impermanent nature of this particular odor, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This is how he or she knows how the senses, that in this case nose, sensory object, in this case odor, and the fetter, whether it is earth-bound fetter or sky-bound fetter, or lower fetter or high fetter, he knows, and then he knows, or he or she knows, this was not there before, now it is arisen, and I pay attention to it. It is just like the wind blows away the molecule of the odor coming from outside. So in the nose, inside, the wind can take care of the odor molecules, smell creating molecules, wind can take care of it. But what happened to the mental state that is created by the smell? What is the mental state? The fetter. Fetter is either greed or hatred. If the smell is unpleasant, hatred, disappointment, anger arises. If the smell is pleasant, desire arises, underlying tendency of desire. That becomes a fetter. And that you cannot get rid of by blowing winds, using a fan. No, it remains in the mind. The greed cannot, it will be very easy if we can get rid of the desire by blowing a fan. No, we have to be mindful. We have to be mindful of this fetter to see impermanent nature of this fetter. That is, this desire. The fetter is not something material, it is completely mental. And therefore we have to use mental exercise to get rid of mental factors. Fetter is a mental factor. What is the technique we use to get rid of the mental factor? Is to use our right understanding. Noble Eightfold Path. Always, whenever we want to get rid of certain mental states, we must use Noble Eightfold Path. In the Four Noble Truth, you have suffering, you have a cause of suffering, that is desire. In this case, desire is arisen as a fetter. That is the cause of suffering. Now, then it can be overcome, this cause of suffering can be overcome by the Noble Eightfold Path. The number one of the Noble Eightfold Path, the first one, is right understanding. What is the right understanding? Understanding of impermanence. Understanding of the Four Noble Truth itself is right understanding. Understanding Four Noble Truth includes understanding of impermanence. What is impermanent? Whatever arises, it is impermanent. Because whatever arises is subject to passing away. Because they arise dependently, not independently. As I said, due to elements. Nose is there due to elements, smell is there. This particular smell or the odor, the tiny little molecules all are also are the results of elements. Earth, water, air, fire, elements. Whether it is 4 elements or 6 elements, this order is created by depending on the elements. Now, they are impermanent. Outside element is impermanent, inside element is impermanent. So the mindful meditator used the mindfulness, used right understanding to see how this becomes impermanent. Because of the earth, etc., elements are impermanent. Whatever is generated by the impermanent factors also become impermanent. When the cause is impermanent, results also is impermanent. So it is impermanent in that respect. And therefore, meditator using right understanding is the understanding of impermanence of everything. So he pays attention very carefully to this fetter, and then it disappears from your mind. When it disappears, you know, it is gone. It doesn't come back. It is finished. And these are the 5 stages we have to remember of these fetters. What are the 5 stages? First is knowing the senses. Second is knowing the sensory object. Third is the fetter. Fourth is arising of fetter, knowing unarisen fetter is arisen. Actually, fifth is the disappearance of fetter. And the 6 stages, in the 6 stages is whatever is disappeared does not come back again. Whatever disappeared does not come back again. These are the 6 stages we have to remember in regard to the practice of the sense basis and sensory object basis. So this is called the ayatana. Ayatana, chapter ayatana means basis. Eye base, ear base, nose base, tongue base, body base, mind base, plus sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and the mind object. So remember these categories and how these categories interplay to generate, to bind us. Of course, when we have a desire, the very nature of desire is like water. Water has a binding factor. In the water has binding factor. One drop of water binds another drop of water because inside there's a binding factor. Similarly, the fetters or desire has the magnet, spiritual magnet, to get together, cling together, hold together, and make it firm. And therefore, when we practice mindfulness meditation, Whenever when we understand these things very clearly, each and every one of them very clearly, then it is very easy for us to break this up, and get rid of it. That is the purpose of practice, and therefore we try to remember this, and I will explain these things again next Saturday. Tomorrow you can ask me question in regard to this explanation or this particular practice, fetters. For now I have to end. My time is up, and see you tomorrow. And then I had to end this formally by making my regular benediction, wishing all living beings, particularly those who are in hospitals, suffering from various diseases, taken care of by doctors and nurses, may they recover very soon and return to regular life, practice Dhamma and liberate from samsaric suffering only through the understanding of Dhamma. Also, I want to wish all those doctors, nurses, hospital staffs who take care of these people out of compassion, sacrificing their comfort, risking their life, they take care of these patients. May they continue their wonderful service and attain liberation from samsaric suffering. And those who support them in various ways, financially and otherwise, running hospitals and so forth, may they continue their wonderful service and live long in very good health and finally attain liberation from samsara. And others who are who have been grieving of the loss of their loved ones, and may they return to normal mental state, free from grief, and continue the Dhamma practice and liberate from samsaric suffering. And may all those who are in various places in the world, human, divine and so forth, undergoing all kind of suffering, may they be relieved from suffering and live long in very good health and finally attain liberation from samsaric suffering. And finally everyone be well, happy and peaceful